Oldhammer. The term means different things to different people, doesn't it? On this episode, we're going to talk about that with Garth James, who's an organiser of the annual Bring Out Your Lead event, which takes place deep in the Chaos Wastes, otherwise known as England. Let's dive in and find out what's on Garth's painting table right now.
Oh, I got loads. I undercoat loads of things with intent, right? And then they all sit there. So, in fact, I think 22's painting promise is finish painting, or if I just finish painting the stuff I've undercoated, right? That would be the 2022 taken up, right? But at the moment, it's I've got 6 heavy horse, I suppose, for a Third Ed Imperial Army, so the old I suppose they're Foundry Knights, right? But Imperial Hohensknechte, something like that, whatever they're called. So that's there. I've got some plague bearers after that. I've got some whites after that. I've got some grey knights I want to get. Oh man, there's a lot. There's a lot in the paint. It's a big painting table. It's a lot of junk.
When you talk about undercoating, then do you go white, do you go black, or do you go, is it the zenithal they call it, that method?
Yeah, exactly. I kind of started doing that. So I do a dark grey and then a white zenithal, depending on what it is, right? So for the knights, they're dark grey because they're all going to just be covered in metal. But yeah, so I used to do black. Dark grey. I don't know why. I changed. It doesn't make a difference to me. I don't know. I haven't painted stuff enough to.
I've been for the last year or so. I've been doing the black, then the grey sear over the top, and then I've been using the contrast paints, and not very many of them, just like browns and that. And I found it comes up really well. Like, it's very minimalist, but I almost feel bad because it looks better than my ability is, if that makes sense. Like, I think I'm not capable of it, because I suppose, the contrast paints and stuff like that, they're designed to make it easier, aren't they? So.
Well, I'm looking forward, part of my plan. So, I mean, my big plan, what I'd really like to do, right? I've got in White Dwarf 157, there is a battle report between a little Empire army and a massive Goblin force, right? And I now have accrued that Goblin force, right? This is a 4th Ed battle report, and so my plan, I now need to paint that thing, and so my plan is to acquire all the contrast paints. It's the only way I can see myself getting through there, right? Contrast the hell out of those things and call it done. So I've never used contrast paints yet, and that's probably and again, right? I'm going to undercoat a bunch of stuff. All the other undercoated stuff I just said. It's just going to get pushed to the back of the queue, and I'll I'll put them on the front and have a go, right? But it's hard. I've stopped painting armies. I paint what I like, if you know what I mean, as opposed to trying to paint units, and that makes it. That means I've got a mishmash. That's why it looks like it does, because I've got this mishmash of stuff that it's fun to paint, but it doesn't make a cohesive force of any description.
Yeah, magpie syndrome.
yeah, exactly. Magpie syndrome. So
we want to chat about Oldhammer today and bring out your lead. So I think a good place to start is the term Oldhammer. I've seen it mean many different things to many different people. What's your definition of Oldhammer, if you have such a thing?
Yeah, there's every 6 months, if you just pop that question right on Facebook, what is Oldhammer, and what's the explosions? I think, honestly, Oldhammer is and it's relative to everybody, right? But I can't help thinking most people would probably relate to this. I think it's the thing where you hark back to the time that you, for want of a better phrase, fell in love with the hobby. Right, in the honeymoon period, the 6 months, when you're looking at the books and you're looking at the pictures or the painted figures, or and you're loving this stuff. That and you just captivated, right? That you're going back to that period, to those figures, to those games, and there probably would have been the time you're trying to convince your friends to get into the thing. You're showing, look at this amazing thing I found, look at these cool orcs with guns, and your friends are like, you're such a loser, stay away from me, whatever it is. But you're trying to convince people to get into this stuff, and some people bite. right? And then you've just got that place where you've got a few little figures and you just managed to paint them and you're using Humbrol and it's it's awful, but you're loving it, right? And you're looking in the books thinking, how do I get that stuff? How do I get those trees? How do I get that scenery? How do I get all that stuff? I think that's Oldhammer. That's us all coming back to trying to rebuild that experience, I suppose.
Yeah, because the first time I came across the term and I thought, oh, that sounds right. For my era, which was like, I think my first White Dwarf was like late 1993. And when I looked, like you're saying, there's discussions all over the place. And then I seen some people pushing against that and saying, no, that's actually Hero Hammer. And I was thinking, well, it sounds good enough to me. I'm going to just continue to call it Oldhammer, even though, you know, I remember, I'm not really on social media, but I'd posted a photo of, it was a White Dwarf, one of my first White Dwarf magazines. So, like I say, about 1993. And this guy replied and he's like, you think that's old? Here's an older one. And it was almost like, well, obviously there are older ones. Like, I didn't say it was the first edition. So yeah, you do get a bit of that, don't you? Like one-upmanship on who could
exactly
be
oldest. Right. Yeah, that's right. It's interesting because we've watched this obviously over the years as it's developed, as there's been a bit of brinkmanship and who's the old hammerist of all the old hammerers, you know. And it's a silly exercise, right? Because you're getting people that are coming in who weren't even born at that point in time. Who weren't even born when we were playing the first edition, but they're loving, you know, the really old editions. They've got the old figures, and then equally you've got people who were there. You know, they worked for Games Workshop. They were making the figures. They, you know, and they're loving the new plastic stuff, right? So it's you know, to coin a governmental phrase, it's not helpful to try and categorize Oldhammer anymore. I mean, my personal Oldhammer, I guess, is the third edition of Fantasy Battle. Going into the fourth edition, right? So that kind of window, probably about 88 to 93, 94 is probably like that's my honeymoon period, right? And for two, they both look very different, those two editions, you know, the change between them. And suddenly, you know, third edition, these really thin kind of small figures, and they're lovely in their own way. And they're very, I guess, Tolkien-esque. And then fourth edition is just suddenly everyone's in the YMCA pose, you know, and they're all holding their arms up and they're all painted red, and it's just so ridiculous you can't help but love it, right? It's that's my personal Oldhammer, I guess.
When we look back at the aesthetic, and I know there are different aesthetics over the years when we look back into the Oldhammer, if you like, period, but I always wonder what it is about it. You know, did you ever have the combat cards, the Citadel combat cards?
I didn't.
Did you ever own a deck of those? So
no,
that
I
was
never heard of them until I got into Oldhammer as an adult, right? Like, the what? I've got what are these things? All these board games and stuff that I'd never heard of any of those things, right, when I was a kid.
No, that was like my very, very first Games Workshop product, and I didn't even know what Games Workshop were. They were just in a gift shop somewhere, and I got the Goblinoids, and it was like, you know, Fungus, the Loon, Snotling Warrior and stuff, and I'm like, this is mental, like, and just the aesthetic of it, you know, they looked comical in their own like cute way, and when you look at the miniatures now, obviously the quality is fantastic, but I look at them and I'm like, nobody looks like they're having any fun here. You know, the miniatures now, they're very pious, or and I wonder, you know, because you get folk in their 20s or teens that want to do the Oldhammer thing because they like the aesthetic, even though on a technical level it's a no-brainer towards, you know, the new stuff because it's so finely detailed. So I just wonder what it is about the aesthetic that still pulls people into this day.
I think it's because the figures that they sculpted at the time, you know, these are, I mean, essentially these are artists sculpting little miniature statues, right? And so there's some love going in, you know, there's some artistic kind of, I think it would be funny to have somebody hitting somebody else with a mushroom. You know, I think it would be awesome to have, you know, whatever, large tooth, you know, orcs with giant teeth, whatever it is. And there's some kind of artistic love, you know, for what they're doing. You know, they like what they're doing. They're making something fun. They're invested in what they're doing. And there's no corporate line that you have. There's no set pattern or style or anything that they have to follow, right? And you look at it now, you know, I'm pretty sure there are guidelines And I don't know that, but there are guidelines into how you should make. They need to look like this. They'll need to look the same. Because they must be cohesive, I guess. And I think as well that in those days you couldn't sculpt these crazy epic dynamic poses. Or not you couldn't sculpt them, you couldn't mold them. Right. Whereas now, obviously, you can. And so I think people have become addicted to the crazy. I'll make every single figure look like this amazing dynamic pose and all this bits of scenery stuff and whatever. And what it leads to is a force that is just so impossibly dynamic and amazing. It doesn't scan well to the eye. Right. Whereas you look at Oldhammer armies, and there's lots of people, like on real battlefields, standing around literally doing nothing and looking bored with the fact. That's what the figures look like, and we love them for that. So I think it's because the sculptors don't really love what they're doing. I think I haven't actually spoken to a modern kind of plastic. I don't really even know how they do it, but they're doing it on CAD, right? They're making these things digitally, so it's a different process, and they're too perfect. The figures today are too perfect. They're beautiful, like I said, the quality is amazing, but it's almost like when you look at all the third ed figures, and like they've all got things on braces or something, like bands on their arms, because that's a place where the sculptor would have cut the hand off and put something else on there, and then the only way you can hide that is to you put something on the arm, and they've all got like all this unnecessary. Why have they got all that stuff? Because that's how the sculptors had to make it work at the time, and it just makes them beautiful, right? They're literally covering sins.
I always laugh because all the metal miniatures and that I buy and paint, and the amount of pouches and bags and stuff. I'm like, how many sandwiches did you take to this battle? Like if you were really going to war, it's like how many handbags could I wear? What have you got in there? Exactly. But I know it's because that's the sculptor. It makes it a bit easier to produce a miniature, doesn't it? Have no that stuff.
Exactly. You're hiding the sins, right? The places where you took the dolly and you made a thing and then you made another thing out of that thing, but you had to change it a little bit, and you hide the sins with pouches and other nonsensical things to carry into a fight. Yes.
Do you like the Monopoles aesthetic? Because I know that divides opinion. Big huge units, and everyone's exactly the same.
When I started, I was deeply opposed to it. It offended me, right? But as I've grown up, and you look back at that honeymoon period, that same thing I'm talking about, and you realize there was so much Monopose in that window. I can't help but love it eventually. There are some figures that are just truly, I can't stand them. But most Monopose now I'm okay with. Right? I collect a bit of Monopose. The fourth ed Beastmen I love. The fourth ed Halberdiers, I love those too. But yeah, some of them the things that came from not Hero Quest. What's the Battle Masters? I think some of the Beastmen from that are awful. They just offend me. But it's by and large, I love them. Yeah, no, I've got plenty of Monopose now.
What my memories of Monopoles as well, and the units that I collected back in the day, you'd get the metal command unit and your plastic Monopoles, and I was probably doing something wrong, but on our games when we were young, and you'd move a unit, they're all plastic, so it's very light, but you've got this weight at the front. Always a musician with some sort of heavy implement, and he'd just fall over, and because he was metal, he would chip. So it was like, probably just needed. And people are still making tables with sand, literally sandpaper that you can drag. It falls over, and then you push it forward, and you scrape it. Yeah, no, I know. Relate. Yeah, and then you put blue tack on the back of the base to try and keep it down, and then you break the banner when you lift it off. Relate. So what were some of your favourite Monopose units then? I think you mentioned the Beastmen there.
Yeah, the fourth ed Beastmen. I mean, I suppose everybody can't help it. I suppose the high elves, right? Thousands of high elves.
Everyone's painted a lot of them.
Exactly right. Yeah, the goblins and high elves from that fourth ed set. I said the Empire Halberdiers, the unit of Altdorf, whatever it was, the 30, which I believe are awful to paint. I've never actually painted one, but I quite like the battle. I said Battlemaster Beastmen are awful, but the Battlemasters, the Imperial side, their swordsmen, their halberdiers. I love those. They're good. Even those chunky Skaven that didn't rank, like them. Oh, and the beach balls. Love those dwarves. Those little round dwarves that they made for Force. I love them. Love those.
I really like the Chaos Dwarf ones.
The big
I found a
heads,
couple of those. My brother, he had Chaos Dwarfs when we were wee, and he's got a couple of boys now. And I was a few months ago, I was round at my mum's, and I was just playing with one of them, this old toy box, Lego and stuff. And I found a couple of Monopoles Chaos Dwarfs. So I just kind of, he's 3 years old, and I'm slipping these into my pocket. I feel like I'm stealing from him. But I took them home and painted them up, and I sent my brother a photo. I was like, I found these. So I had good time. I painted a couple of them. I don't know if I could have done like a whole unit of them, but it was fun just to go back and know that you're just painting a unit for the fun. It's not working towards building an army or that. There's a certain satisfaction in that, but a creative freedom. So bring out your lead. Tell us a bit about it. So it's a Oldhammer get together. I know that you don't maybe like the word tournament.
Exactly right, because that's what it ain't, right? Bring Out Your Lead is not a tournament. It's and we had to make that distinction, right? Because I guess up until now, wargamers have learned that when you come together, 30 people come together to a place to play games, it's a tournament, right? Because that's what else would it be? We've just been indoctrinated into this ridiculous position. And so, in a way, if you think if it's related to kind of cards, I suppose regular get-togethers are kind of like race tournaments. Oldhammer is kind of like a classic car, rally. You get together, you come and put these beautiful cars in a field, and everyone looks at them like, oh, wow, that's amazing. You get to drive them, but no one actually races the things, because why would you, right? Just unhappiness lies that way. It's the same with Bring Out Your Lead. Bring Out Your Lead is not a tournament. Obviously, you're playing war games. Somebody's going to lose in a war game, right? That's how they work. But the intent is to take away the competitive nature that you can win, you can beat everybody else. You're the best and they're not. Type of thing. It takes out the list building, the meta, all that stuff, all the dirty horror that competitive gamers bring. And let's be clear, there is a place for that. I know people love that, and there are some people who love Oldhammer who also love they love looking in the books and finding the horror and bringing the pain, right? They love that stuff, and there's a place that you're welcome to that, but it's not Bring Out Your Lead, and that's most of the when you go to Bring Out Your Lead, you're going there for narrative gaming. You're going there for, what got us, the people that do this. Oldhammer, you asked the question, what is Oldhammer? I think one of the things that is fairly constant, though, in anybody's Oldhammer is the desire for, I'm going to say, narrative games, right, as opposed to rules-led games. You've got 2,000 points, I've got 2,000 points. We've got a synchronous battle that is supposedly fair, right? It's that doesn't reflect, when we're looking at these figures on the table, a lot of us are seeing the Lord of the Rings in our head. You're watching the movies and the horsemen come down the hill and the light shining behind them. The rules don't cover that. There's nothing that provides that sense of narrative. So a lot of the games are focused on narrative as opposed to points, as opposed to rules-led behavior, right? And that means people break the rules, and suddenly there's this responsibility. You get to this thing. So, well, as players, the rules are not responsible for us having fun. We are. And that Bring Out Your Lead is, I suppose, for want of a better phrase, designed, and I'd say organically designed, but it brings that aspect out of players, right? So, basically we dismiss the tournament nomenclature immediately. Obviously, Blood Bowl is the exception, right? If you're playing Blood Bowl, well, you're playing a tournament, right? But it's the rule set's designed to do that. So
I remember just with you saying that. I remember we used to get taken to Games Workshop for our birthday. When I was, it must have been like 12 or something, and me and my friend, and of course the guy in the shop. He asked us if we want to play Warhammer, and if we've got the proper table, the fully painted army, nothing that we'd ever had before had access to. And I remember he was setting up the forces, and he was obviously, again, he would have had to play it properly, if you like. So he took, I can't remember, I think I had a high elf army, and it's this big griffin, and he took that away because there wasn't the points left, so he said, "Oh, we can't use that." And I'm 12 years old. I'm thinking, but why not? I mean, it's cool. Why wouldn't you use it?
Can't we take something else of it? Take these. I don't want these people. Who are these people to boast?
Or
Get rid of them.
why can't you just put them all on? I was thinking, like, I want to use them all. Why wouldn't you? Because I couldn't comprehend that, because us as a small group of friends, we just used everything we had, which wasn't much. But you're like, well, why wouldn't you use it? It's painted. Even if it wasn't painted, I would use it. So, it's funny that it's just the two different approaches, isn't it? Storytelling and fun versus I'm trying to win this,
Yeah, exactly.
So how long has Bring Out Your Lead been going then?
We started 2013. Yeah, 2013. We started 2013, that's right, at the old site in Nottingham. And then, so 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, that's 7. Obviously, we missed 20 because COVID. And we've just done this one now. So, we're on the 8th one now over a period of 9 years. So, what was its initial genesis then? How did it come about in the first place? Well, so back in the day, we're talking probably 2011, right? I guess there were people, not many, right, that were interested in Oldhammer, and it didn't have a name then, but, interested in the older stuff. And I guess they had started blogging about it, and this is my story as well, right? I remember playing at a club in Salisbury and having tried to set up a narrative game for no other reason than I didn't have enough painted figures to meet somebody else's points value, right? So I thought, well, okay, don't worry, you play with your massive force, I'll play with my tiny force, but instead of playing a regular game, what we'll do is we'll make some kind of objective, which just blew the guy's mind, couldn't deal with it at all. And we just had a really unsatisfying game for me. I'm sure he loved it, but it was for me, it was kind of like this, not a rage quit, but like I came home and thought to myself, I genuinely don't understand why I'm doing this, because I'm not having fun. Right? And that night, I remember, so I go home, I Google some stuff, and I remember 3rd edition. 3rd edition is my happy, safe place. I don't have 3rd edition at this point. Obviously, I had it as a kid. That went away, however they do. And so I think, I know, I'm going to Google some stuff. I'm going to buy me some 3rd edition books because I just love those. And I feel like I want some goodness back, right? And on the back of that, basically, I came across some blogs. I came across some other people that kind of had this similar feeling, right? This frustration towards the tournament scene, this thought that you're not playing a game now, we're practicing for some bigger, better game in the future for a tournament. You're practicing for a tournament, right? That's what this guy was doing. It drove me nuts. And I remember... as we started collecting, so I started a blog that night or that week at any rate. I started a blog as well. And we start these few people. And I remember when we started, it was less than 10, 4 or 5 blogs that I could find, people that were legitimately interested in this stuff and blogged about it. But we obviously started talking. One person puts a comment on another person's blog, and suddenly it's like, hey, you like the thing, I like the thing. We should be digital friends. And then what we realized, of course, is that as more people became involved, and I'm not talking massive numbers, like maybe up to 20 heads become involved, we realized that literally none of us lived anywhere near each other. And I'm not talking like within an hour or 2 hours. Like we couldn't have had a more diverse spread across the UK than we did. And obviously, some of them are even overseas, right? Some of them we just wrote off. We're never going to see those people there in the States. But the point is, for those that we could, we started talking about, well, how would we get together? And there's a chap, I suppose his name, his digital name is Ernie Roma, which is a 3rd ed throwback, by the way. But he was a chairman. Dave Gilson is his name. He was the chairman of a club in Cambridge. And so initially we started with, if you're the chairman of a club, because the thing is, if you're organizing an event, what I don't want is people to have to move tables. And, I need an event. You need tables, you need scenery, you need toilets, right? You need parking. Those are the key. If you don't have those things, it becomes really hard to make the thing work, right? Not impossible, but harder, right? Exponentially harder, especially for people traveling these massive distances. But anyway, so he's the chairman of a club. He's obviously got all of these facilities, right? So that's I started talking to him, and there wasn't much there wasn't much traction, wasn't kind of happening. And I remember at the same time we discovered that Foundry had, a lot of us didn't know that Foundry had obviously been there since the beginning, and still had the historical ranges, and obviously was run by the Ansel family, who were involved in the foundations of Games Workshop and the thing it currently is today. But we kind of discovered that, and we're like, oh wow, this is nice. So they have a spiritual connection, right? So we always thought, well, we should approach them maybe. So they were number 2 in the list. Right, and then there was a third option. I forget. It was a pub, I think, maybe in Windsor. I can't remember. But the point is, I remember talking to Dave. It's like saying, what are we going to do? How does this work? Can you get back to me? And that night or that day, Marcus Ansel, who I think is the oldest son in the Ansel family, puts a message on one of the blogs, right, saying, by the way, if you guys ever want to run an event, just let us know. And I'm like, I read the message, I wrote the email, and I sent it, right. And Marcus was super responsive, right. It's and that's what set it up. And that was 2013, but we set that up for the summer. And I remember we had a conference call, right, with like, at the time, I suppose the lead, I don't say the leading, the bloggers who responded, the most responsive bloggers, to try and talk about what that was going to be. And it was a very organic event. Like we didn't like, it wasn't an event, but we had this discussion about, what are you going to do on the day? What does it look like? Do we charge? Don't we charge? What does that all look like? And we had this conversation and we laid that out, right? And then when Bring Out Your Lead actually happened that first time, and this is now in Foundry's their Nottingham site, so that they had, I think it used to be an abattoir, right? But it was a great site, right? But it was kind of like in a, not a great place in Nottingham. And we went there, and so we were playing, and it was fine. They had all the tables, and it was great, and we were having a good time. And then what happened is Diane, the matriarch of the Ansel clan, I suppose the person who runs Foundry right now, and indeed the person that really backs up all of the organization that I do, right? The real powerhouse behind the event is she. She said to us, "Well, did you guys want us to make some food for you?" Because we were in this dodgy part of Nottingham and kind of nobody really knew. We didn't have a good plan. Nobody thought about that. Right? It was all like getting to play games. And she said, "Oh well, we can do some catering if you like. You can make some." And this is this is what cemented the thing, because of course the other side of the of the world is how do you cater for these gamers, right? And so Diana just solved that problem. Suddenly now there was catering. There was affordable catering. It was good catering. And we had everything. Now we had parking, we had tables, we had scenery, we had, toilets, clean toilets, we had food, and in fact, and their license to sell alcohol as well. So it was just a cherry on top, right? Yeah. So it was just a match made in heaven. So off the back of that, we then decided, well, we should do that again. That was we all had a great weekend playing games there. And that's it was very organic, right? And that's how it started, off the back of Marcus saying, "Hi, you should contact us if you want to do this."
Did you call it Bring Out Your Lead that first time? It's a great name.
Yeah, I'd love to claim credit, but it wasn't mine actually. So the person, and I refer to him frequently. If you had to ask me how I got into Oldhammer, it's off the back of a guy called Steve Beals. He has a blog called Somewhere the Tea's Getting Cold. You should look at that. If you want to see pure Oldhammer, right? Just challenge. If ever you're feeling out of inspiration, just go back there, right? And just go back to 2010, do what you want to do. It was his blog was foundational in my decision. I don't need you anymore, Games Workshop. I'm going back in the old ways. But he coined it. He put together an army for this 2013 event, and he had titled it Bring Out Your Lead. And so that became the name. And it's an unfortunate name when you now look at it, Boyle. There's so many other cooler things we could have called it, but that's the name that stuck, and that's what it is now.
So having the involvement of the Ansel family, are there any other Games Workshop household names for back in the day that get involved in the whole thing?
Not from an organizational perspective, but they do come. Yeah, absolutely. I think that even some of them just out of morbid fascination. But so we've had. I think a lot of them love the fact that there's people that genuinely love. If you think like in their careers, you think take a guy like Rick recently, right? And I mean, he's not going to look back in third edition and think, "Wow, that was the rule set. Totally nailed that one. That was my best work ever." He's going to point to other rule sets, right, as professionally better things. But I think the fact that there are some people that love what he did so much to the point that they will go and spend some money to stay in a hotel and buy these old figures and kind of this. It's nothing but affirmative, right? And it's the same for the artists. It's the same for all of these people. So I think, I think they love just being able to talk about it, right? As well. So exactly. Rick has been there. Nigel Stillman's been there. John Blanche came. Tony Ackland is there. Tony Yates is there. Tony Howe came. Even folk from other studios come through as well. Stallard, the people that run Warlord games now, involved in Games Workshop. It is the lead belt, and these people come to see, right? To see and kind of remember some of the stuff, right? And then they do look at these things and go, well, I remember that, or and obviously there's the stories of how badly put together the thing really was, right? To hear how people actually even put these books together is amazing stuff. But they're not there organizationally, and there's no, we don't. It's not like oh wow, we've racked up these 4 celebrities for you to come and see, right? It doesn't work that way. Like we don't know any sooner than anybody else who's going to be there on the day. Kev Adams, I suppose, is your resident name. He does a lot of work for Foundry still, so he's partially he's a fixed name, I suppose, almost, because he does the face sculpting as well, and yeah, he's attached, but loads of them. What we realize now, of course, is they're all getting older, so there's that gradually it becomes harder for them to come, literally because of health.
The games on the day, so again, we've covered that it's not a tournament, but how do the games actually work on the day?
So what we found, they've kind of evolved over the years, right? In the beginning, people wanted to play the games that they couldn't play anywhere else, right? So you had these really massive games, these big sieges, these kind of 20,000 point behemoth games, right? And what people found was that, they were struggling with the fear of missing out, right? So if you were stuck on your big siege game, what they meant is you couldn't be involved in that realm of chaos game over there, right? So people have gradually worked out that what you want is small games that are easy to get on and easy to get out of, right? So that you can go to your next game or you can be involved somewhere else. And also something that enables people, it's a low bar of entry for people who are traveling. People might have massive armies, but if you come from the States, you can't bring them with you, right? You've got to bring a small chosen force, or you've got to do some pretty serious logistics work to get anything useful, to a different country. I'm so grateful that I live in the same country as Foundry, because the thought of posting an army, and leaving my things in the care of UPS or whatever is just horrifying, right? You can feel your testicles kind of curling inwards at the thought. But so the point is, the games, I guess, generally tend to be, they're big and impressive when you look at them, but they're designed to be easy to get in and out of. Right, so most of the games will end on time. We have kind of 3 slots a day. There's basically morning, afternoon, and evening slot, right? So some people have games that run across 2 or 3 slots. There's no problem with that at all, but we tend to find most people will try and shrink the games that they have into the slots so that they can get out and go and, they'll run one game and then they go and play in another game, and then that way they get around all the games as much as possible. That said, there are enough diehards that just like to play against each other and they haven't seen each other for the year. So I say diehard, that sounds bad, but just people who don't want to participate with anybody else. They just want to book a table, play a game with friends, and go home. And so you'll see games like that as well. So, but this year was nice because it was smaller. We did see there was a massive game on the Friday, which I haven't seen for a while. What we do see, we've seen this a few times. The big tables in the marquee, we have 2 kind of big executive tables, right? Kind of marketed as 12 by 6, but actually some of them are even, the one is 7 feet across in the middle. Those tables tend to have these kind of participation games. So that, like Hell's Reach, you've seen pictures. A lot of people see pictures of Hell's Reach. Harry and team brought this kind of big fantasy layout the one year. And the intent of that, although it's one piece of scenery, and I suppose in your head one kind of narrative, what you're really seeing is lots of games, different people playing different games right next to each other in the same scenery layout, and they can interact with each other if they choose to, but they don't have to, right? And that's also a nice way to people get to have this amazing backdrop for a very small game for themselves. So that's and again, there's no rule set that covers that sort of thing, right? That's all organic stuff that people have worked out.
What rule sets tend to be the ones that people are working off of? I know they won't be sticking to them always verbatim, but what rule sets do we tend to see?
Well, third edition fantasy, Rogue Trader. I mean, you see second editions, a few second ed scenarios that come out, but people bring second ed from the scenarios. So, Bloodbath at Orc's Drift, the Terror of the Leechmaster. They don't bring second ed just for the sake of second ed, right? Obviously, there's a fair chunk of third edition fantasy, Rogue Trader, second edition 40k, fourth edition to fifth edition fantasy. There is a smattering of sixth and eighth edition fantasy. I've never seen any 40k beyond second edition. It's not to say it's not welcome, but it's just I haven't seen that. And then some people bring the modern Games Workshop stuff. I wish I knew what they were called, right? Gloomspire, Gloomhaven, something like that. I can't remember. That's a different game. Gloomhaven's a board game. But you can play that too if you want, by the way, but nobody does. But whatever the hell the new Warhammer things are called, they bring that, right? Age of Sigmar, you do get people to play that little hex board, with the enormous plastic figures, and they're just as welcome. Dark Future's been getting a lot of love, I've noticed, and then some people will make up their own thing. So you get a lot of skirmish gaming that's made up of like shadows of. Rangers of Shadow Deep, I think it's called. The Stargrave, Frostgrave, those games. I think there's people that run that as well. So, but, mostly it's the old Games Workshop systems, but it's not confined to that at all.
Mm-hmm. So, Get any Battle Masters, Hero Quest? See those on?
Oh yeah, of course.
Show?
Oh yes, I forgot about those. I haven't seen Battle Masters, but I have seen there's the Hero Quest. Yeah. This was the first year I've not seen any kind of dungeon crawl something, right? But yeah, Hero Quest, Advanced Hero Quest. There's almost always a table that has some of that on it.
Do you see any cool conversions with miniatures?
Oh yeah. Yes. People work hard. You're going back to that brinksmanship side. There's a poisonous side to the brinksmanship, but sometimes you do get this beautiful thing where it's like, well, I made a figure out of 6 impossibly hard to find modeling kits. So, well, I made one out of 7. So, and there's this, and they're beautiful, these amazing kits, right? That people have butchered with pride, if you know what I mean, and only made, it's the thing that fits into the ethos the most, right? Which is I did not value and respect how rare that thing was. What I did was chop it up and make another thing even more impossibly rare than the thing that it was before, and I love it and I'm happy, right? So no, you do. You get some amazing stuff out there. And then now you're gonna say, which is the one you love the most? I'm like, I don't remember any of them.
Do you ever do any conversions with your miniatures?
Oh yeah. I especially like working with metal, right? And I know that's harder, right? But there's the challenge of converting metal figures and pinning them and just getting the green stuff to do, making it work. I do, yeah.
Made any? Is it characters you tend to create, or?
Yeah. So I mean, I guess in my head. So I'll have to send you links. I suppose you can see these things. But I made a Grom, my own kind of Grom figure out of a squig. Right, so because Grom wasn't big enough, I needed a bigger, fatter Grom. So I did that, and and I had to do some chainmail, with green stuff. So I mean that's a conversion, I suppose. I've recently done a mummy and a manticore, right? So you get that derpy manticore with a necromancer on. I forget what his name is. Somebody hell-sniffed, and it's really it's an ugly manticore. Right, there's a special training to make something that looks as ugly as that, right? Nobody can just make one of those. They're always hideous, right? But we all love it because it's the ugliest thing, one of the ugliest things Games Workshop ever made. But, and I looked at that trying, how do I work with this thing, right? So I had to repose it, like it's standing up on a tree, it's kind of leaning over, its wings are in a different position. There was quite a lot of work to, fix all of the sins with green stuff. But that was the most recent one that I've done. I've got to, I made this a friend of mine. So ironically, a friend of mine is he's like I'm not into competitive play at all, right, anymore. And a friend of mine is kind of like he's an ETC team captain, right? Like he's just we never played games of one because we'd probably end up fighting. But it's he's just got all this dirty horror and he's got all these lists that are just designed to make people cry. Right, and with that, of course, comes the figures. And when you're at ETC level, I mean, you're spending hundreds of pounds on figures, right? I remember he asked if he could store a bunch of stuff in my shed, so my garage here when we still had one. And but he said, but if you want to make any of the stuff, you can, right? And so he had just sprues and sprues and sprues of Titans, right? Because I guess that was the thing that was going to win. So I remember taking one of these Titans, and I was looking at the Titan and thinking, I've never really got Titans. I like Titans. I like big robots as much as the next node, but this Titan system makes sense. But I was looking at the bits, and there were these beautiful organic shapes, that make up, I guess, the shoulder blade. And eventually thought, I bet you I can make a little tank out of that. And so I did. It's my point of pride. I was, is having taken 100-pound kind of kit, and and obviously something that's probably worth like 1,000 points in the game, and rendering it into some 40-point. Useless tank. It's just ridiculous. But again, it's I love it. So my favorite little plastic conversion. This token little tank. I'd do it again if I could get more of those, but I'm not paying the money, right? He's taking all his stuff back, and it's like I don't know if I offended him with that move.
Here's a serious and important question. If you had to replace your car with any vehicle or mode of transport or anything from the Oldhammer era, what would you like to go about the town in? Would you fancy taking the Snotland pump wagon to your work?
This is can you name all the old things? Vehicles. I mean, that's
because I suppose if you're looking for quality, you maybe want a dwarf to build it, but then the Empire were pretty handy at building stuff too, weren't they? But then, like I say, the Snotland pump wagon, can you not take that? Imagine parking that outside your work.
Yeah, no, well, exactly. I mean, it would have to. Yeah, what would I take? What would I take? I probably so my first. Yeah, do you know what? I mean, it's. I guess it's a kind of a like for like thing, but in Rogue Trader, the orcs had these little dozy buggies, and they replaced them with these horrible plastic ones. But in the beginning, they were these tiny little metal, kind of little buggies, and with the dude behind with a gun that was impossibly close to the driver's head. I'd have one of those. I loved, and I remember that thing fondly because the first game I ever played ever with miniatures had one of those in it, right? And I remember going up against Space Marines, and they just had these ridiculous tanks, and everything was ridiculous, right? And there was this dozy little buggy with two guys, and one of them had a gun, and that was it. That was the vehicle, right? And and so yeah, I'd have one of those.
What would you have as a pet? What would you like to walk around the park with? Would you take like a squig or maybe one of the big beasts, an Orgle or something? Imagine getting one of them on a lead.
Oh yeah,
taking them around the park.
I'd do that. I'd love to have one of those on a lead. Yeah, I'll go with that piece of Orgle.
Until it came to picking up the excrement.
I'd like to do. If I have one of those, I'd probably have servants to deal with some of the horror. Right. Let's chase this fantasy right down to the very end, right? I'm surrounded by thousands of pieces of gold, and yeah, exactly. I live in a castle with ravens flying around the top of it. Yeah, yeah, I love that. I think I love the idea of them being playful, right? These playful demons of Nurgle. So.
Do you ever pick up any of the new Oldhammery stuff? Like Nightmare, Die Hard, Midland Miniatures.
Yeah, that's right. I do have some stuff. Yeah, so I forget where they come from. You see the Kickstarter, like, yes, I'll have one of those. That looks like the thing, So, but yeah, no, I do. So I've got. I can't remember, and I wish I could give them the credit, but I genuinely can't remember. But somebody made like the that there's that Space Marine kind of shooting a bunch of redemptionists. There's a picture, and somebody's made that scene, right? So I've got those, for example. I think think it's Diego Serrate. I don't know if he.
Oh yeah, that's
Skulls for
Nightmare. Yeah, Nightmare.
He's got so he made Space Groms. I try and collect all the Groms. I've got this thing with Grom. I don't know why, but I've got Space Grom from him and a couple of other things that he did. Yeah. I not heavily. I'm not going like so. Like I remember somebody made like the Tyrannid cult. It's Gene Seeder cult. Sorry. They made some really awesome figures. But I thought, I'd love to get on that, but I never did. So there's some that I don't know if they're available anymore. Right. I certainly think I'd like to flesh out a 4th Third Empire Force one day. I don't want to pay recasters the ridiculous fees, as new. So I'll probably end up going for White Knight to cover that, which probably isn't much cheaper, but at least it's pure, right? So yeah, and I'm not opposed to it. I think it's a good idea. I'm glad that there are companies that are bringing design aesthetics. That same thing we're talking about, the love of the artist. Right? An artist makes a figure he likes, and it's cast in a single. It's cast as a single figure. It's not multi-part. And they deal with all the challenges of trying to spin mold one of those, right?
So we're just about out of time, Garth. It's been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed it. Where might the listener check you out online? Any blog links or anything like that I could include in the show notes?
Well, my blog is, I haven't touched my blog for years, right? But it's called Warhammer for Adults. So some of those conversions you'll see that I spoke about. I keep promising myself I'll bring it up to date, but I just haven't got there, right? Real life, jobs, kids, family, dogs, fish. And then of course, I suppose Bring Out Your Lead is bringoutyourlead.co.uk. It's not an amazing webpage, and that's because the whole aesthetic of Bring Out Your Lead is to not pay any money, right? So we do our best. So the webpage follows the same aesthetic, right? We could do much better things, I know, for even very little money, but it's good enough to tell you about Bring Out Your Lead, right? But that's probably it. I don't really participate much on Facebook. I don't know why. I don't really, like you, I don't really like social media. I don't get it. I like looking at the old pictures, but yeah, it's probably more of a timing thing. So yeah, I'm not really present. But the point is, you can reach out to me on Facebook if you want to talk to me about Bring It Lead or anything. You can do that. Most people get me on Messenger or at the Bring Out Your Lead. I think it's admin at bringoutyourlead.co.uk.
Thanks very much for listening to this episode of the Tabletop Miniature Hobby Podcast. For show notes, subscribe links and info about how to appear as a guest on a future episode, go to bedroombattlefields.com/podcast.